The cafe was nearly empty when Emma walked in, her hands trembling as she pushed the stroller through the door. She was already 15 minutes late, her carefully applied makeup smudged from the tears she'd wiped away in the parking lot. The babysitter had canceled at the last minute, and Emma had spent the past hour debating whether to cancel this date entirely. She'd almost turned the car around 3 times. But something, maybe desperation, maybe hope, kept her moving forward. She spotted him immediately. Alexander Chen sat at a corner table, his tailored suit making him look like he'd stepped out of a magazine. Emma's stomach dropped. She'd known from his profile that he was successful, but seeing him in person made her feel even smaller, even more out of place. Her second-hand dress suddenly felt threadbare, her worn shoes painfully obvious. And here she was, 32 years old, walking into what was supposed to be a fresh start with a 6-month-old baby in tow. Their eyes met across the room, and Emma watched his expression change, surprise, then confusion. She forced herself to walk forward, each step feeling like a mile. When she reached the table, the words tumbled out before she could stop them, thick with embarrassment and apology. "I'm so sorry. I know this isn't what you expected. My babysitter canceled, and I couldn't reach you in time, and I should have just stayed home. But She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I'm sorry. I brought my baby." Alexander stood slowly, and Emma braced herself for the rejection she'd become so familiar with. This was the part where men made excuses, where they suddenly remembered other commitments, where they looked at her with pity or worse, disgust. She'd been through this dance before, in the 2 years since. Jake's father had walked out when she was 7 months pregnant, calling her condition a deal-breaker he hadn't signed up for. But Alexander didn't run. Instead, he looked down at the stroller, where little Lily was beginning to stir, her tiny fists rubbing at her eyes. A smile broke across his face, genuine, warm, completely unexpected. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to the baby. Emma nodded, too stunned to speak, and watched as this billionaire, businessman she'd learned from his profile that he'd built a tech empire from nothing, knelt down beside the stroller. He didn't seem to care that his expensive suit was touching the cafe floor. "Hello there, beautiful," he whispered to Lily, who had opened her eyes and was staring at him with that intense, curious gaze that babies have. "I'm Alex. I hope you don't mind sharing your mama with me for a little while." Emma sank into her chair, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. This wasn't how these things went. This wasn't how her life worked. Single mothers didn't get fairy tales. They got judgment, rejection, and a constant struggle to keep their heads above water. "Please sit," Alexander said, returning to his seat. "I'm glad you came, and I'm honored to meet both of you," he signaled the waiter. "Can we get a high chair? And maybe some warm milk if you have it? Not too hot." The next hour passed like a dream. Alexander didn't just tolerate Lily's presence. He engaged with her, making faces that brought out her gummy smile, holding her bottle when Emma's arms got tired, never once making Emma feel like her daughter was an inconvenience. They talked about everything: Emma's work as a freelance graphic designer, her struggles to make ends meet, her dreams of one day giving Lily the stability she deserved. Alexander shared his own story, and Emma was shocked to learn it echoed her own in ways she hadn't expected. "My mother raised me alone," he said quietly, his eyes distant with memory. "My father left before I was born. Mom worked 3 jobs to keep us fed, to keep me in school. I watched her sacrifice everything, her youth, her health, her dreams. She never complained, never made me feel like I was a burden, even though I know how hard it was." He looked at Emma with an intensity that made her breath catch. "When I see you with Lily, I see my mother. That same fierce love, that same strength. Do you know how rare that is? How beautiful." Emma felt tears sliding down her cheeks before she could stop them. No one had called her strong in so long. Most days, she felt like she was barely surviving, held together by coffee and sheer willpower. "I'm not strong," she whispered. "I'm terrified every single day. Terrified I'm going to fail her, that I won't be enough." "That fear?" Alexander reached across the table, his hand hovering near hers until she closed the distance. "That's what makes you strong. You're terrified, but you keep going. You keep loving her, keep fighting for her. That's everything." Lily began to fuss, and Emma recognized the signs of an impending meltdown. She'd need to be changed and fed soon, and then she'd need to go down for her nap. The magic of the afternoon was ending, reality creeping back in. "I should go," Emma said, starting to gather her things. "She's going to get cranky, and I don't want to—" "Come with me," Alexander interrupted. "Both of you, please, I want to show you something." Emma hesitated, every warning about stranger danger flashing through her mind. But something in his eyes made her trust him. They left the cafe together, Alexander carrying the diaper bag while Emma pushed the stroller. He led them to a black car parked nearby. Nothing ostentatious. She noticed just a nice sedan and opened the door for them. They drove for 15 minutes, through neighborhoods that got progressively nicer, until they pulled up to a building Emma recognized. The children's hospital. Her confusion must have shown on her face. "I come here every week," Alexander explained as they walked through the entrance, staff members greeting him by name. "After my mother passed away 5 years ago, I needed to do something meaningful with the wealth I'd built. She always said money without purpose was just paper." He led them to a wing of the hospital Emma had never seen before, though she'd brought Lily here twice for checkups. The sign above the door read, "Chen Family Care Center. We provide free child care for single parents while they work," Alexander explained. "Medical care for children whose families can't afford insurance. Parenting classes, job training, therapy services. Everything my mother needed but never had access to." He turned to Emma, his voice thick with emotion. "When you walked into that cafe today with Lily, apologizing for being a mother, for having someone to love and protect, it broke my heart. Because I know that struggle. I lived it watching my mother carry that weight alone." Emma couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She'd spent 2 years feeling invisible, feeling like her existence as a single mother was something to apologize for, something to hide. And here was this man, this incredibly successful, kind man, telling her she was seen, that she mattered. But Alexander wasn't finished. He pulled out his phone, made a quick call, and within minutes, a woman in professional attire appeared. "Emma, this is Sarah Chen, my sister. She runs the center." Alexander's smile was gentle. "I don't want to overstep, and please tell me if I am. But Sarah mentioned last week that we're looking for a graphic designer to help with our outreach programs, our fundraising materials. It's a full-time position, with benefits and flexible hours. There's a child care space right here where Lily would be looked after by trained professionals while you work." Emma's knees buckled. Alexander caught her elbow, steadying her, as tears streamed down her face. Not tears of sadness now, but of overwhelming relief, of possibility, of hope. "Why?" she managed to choke out. "Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me." Alexander's eyes were bright with his own unshed tears. "Because someone should have done it for my mother. Because every child deserves to see their parent smile without worry behind their eyes. Because you walked into that cafe terrified and apologetic, and all I could see was the most courageous person I'd ever met." He paused, his voice dropping to a whisper. "And because when I looked at you with Lily, I didn't just see someone who needed help. I saw someone I wanted to know. Someone I wanted in my life. The interview with Sarah went well, of course it did." Emma thought almost giddily, when the position seemed made for her skills. They offered her the job on the spot, with a salary that made her gasp. That would mean she could finally afford the small house she'd been dreaming about instead of the cramped apartment with the broken heater. 6 months later, Emma stood in that same cafe where it had all begun. Lily, now a year old and babbling happily in her stroller. Alexander sat across from her, and this time there was no nervousness, no apology. Just love, deep, real, and transformative. "I still can't believe this is my life," Emma said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "Believe it," Alexander replied, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You deserve every bit of happiness, Emma. You always did. You just needed someone to see you the way I do, the way everyone who knows you does now." That day in the cafe, Emma had walked in apologizing for being a mother. She'd walked out knowing she never had to apologize for her strength again. The billionaire hadn't saved her. She'd saved herself through 2 years of relentless love and sacrifice. But Alexander had seen her, truly seen her, and offered not a rescue but a partnership, a reminder that kindness still existed in the world. That being a parent wasn't a flaw to overcome, but a strength to celebrate. Some love stories begin with grand gestures. This one began with a simple truth. You are enough, exactly as you are. And sometimes that recognition is the most powerful gift anyone can give.